NBA salary cap analyst previously of Hoops Hype. You can find him on X at Yossi Gozlan. He is Yossi Gozlan.
Yossi,
what's going on,
good,
man? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, guys. How do I sound? Is it okay?
You sound great.
You sound great.
You sound better when
sound like a pro.
Exactly. You sound like a pro.
Always worried about the technical issues at first, but thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, Yossi is the guy that I text with the most mundane or obscure cap questions that could possibly come up in my life. You're the first guy I hit up to be like, what happens if you trade a player? I can't even create it like a good hypothetical scenario, but that's what you're here for.
I'm glad that for a lot of people, it's like, I'm just going to ask Yossi. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, how did you get into salary cap analysis and still dealing with all the kinds of numbers, especially with first apron, second apron, and everything else? How did you get involved in this side of the business here?
I've always been a pretty big fan of the NBA in general, and I'm sure like many of us at some point will realize, we understand it pretty well, maybe try to do something with it. So I just decided to study the cap. I've always done like fake trades on Real GM growing up, and I just thought maybe I should actually like know exactly how it works. So like 6-7 years ago, I just started learning the cap really fully, and I would say about 3 years ago, I really got a like strong mastering / understanding of it. And I've just been writing about it all these years, been able to put out content and do all sorts of stuff with it. And I just love it. It's something that I understand a lot of people don't really want to break into, but for some reason, I just really like it. I really enjoy it. I'm really passionate about it.
It's something that I do think the knowledge and the understanding and the want for that knowledge has definitely grown based on the internet, based off the fracturization of like people who are interested in this stuff. They have all these different people that they can go to now. I think that's a cool thing. So I guess just to start us off, can you just kind of set the table for where Dallas stands? What their limitations are, where they are in the salary cap, and within the CBA, and kind of what restrictions they're looking at in terms, if as we talk about them potentially trying to make trades this season.
So with the Mavs, their biggest limitation is that they are hard capped to the first apron. That's $178 million. And they are right at it with their payroll. With their 15-man roster, they're about $500,000 below it. So the issue isn't so much about can they make the money work. It's more so they're going to have to go dollar for dollar pretty much, or at least decrease the payroll in the end, since they can't really increase it. And Jimmy Butler makes a lot of money. He makes almost $49 million, and that's going to require a lot of heavy lifting on the Mavs' part to get a deal done, because not only do they have to not pass that first apron, but they have to structure the deal where, in all likelihood, they're going to trade out a lot of guys in that scenario to make the money work. You also got to be able to get back the 14 players eventually, all while still being able to not pass that first apron. So there's a lot of, so that's the biggest hurdle. Obviously, what do they have to give up of interest for the Heat? That's a whole nother issue. They have 2 first-round picks, 1 first-round pick swap they can offer. So that might not even get the ball rolling, but assuming it is enough and there is like something to be done between the two, it's gonna take a lot of heavy lifting on the Mavs end to make a deal work when it comes to the salary cap aspect.
Yeah, because a lot of times when just to hammer home this point, which you said about the salary matching or needing to decrease, we talk about trades, and if you're not in the position Dallas is, if you're under the salary or over the salary cap just by a little bit, we talk about 20% matching, right? You can make a trade, and as long as the salaries one way or the other are within 20%, that's a deal. Basically, Dallas doesn't have that 20% upwards mobility when you're looking at a trade like Jimmy Butler, who's in Miami right now. And Mark Stein on the show has already shot down some of the rumors that had started in terms of that being something Dallas is interested in, but it's still an interesting thing to talk about. But it's specifically kind of that budge, that ability to budge, and they don't have that upwards wiggle room at all right now, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So every other team in the NBA knows that about the Mavs, right? So if whether you're Miami or New Orleans with Herb Jones or any other team with any other player the Mavs might be interested in, could that team's GM say, all right, Dallas, we'll take less, or we'll give you less money back. Like, we'll take Daniel Gafford at $14 million and give you a player that's only making $12 million, but it's going to cost you more than it normally would if it was dollar for dollar. Like, instead of giving us a 2, we're going to make you give us a 1 just to save you some cash. Like, is that a realistic thing as we get to trade negotiation season?
So in regards to getting Jimmy Butler, that they're gonna want to hope that there are teams interested in the players the Mavs have, because if there were gonna be a trade, it's unrealistic that the Heat are gonna want to take 4 guys back, because if they're trading Jimmy Butler and likely getting worse, they're gonna want to save money because they're already deep into the tax. So if they're going to take on all these extra players, then they'd have to cut some guys or do some other trades to make room for these guys, because you can't pass 15 players. So the other aspect that makes a Jimmy Butler trade also hard for the Mavs, even like getting past the point that the Heat are on board, is that they're probably going to have to get a third or fourth team involved. So like to your point, you're saying, Daniel Gafford, for example. My guess is that if the Mavs can really, if they're actually in the running for Jimmy Butler, they're going to want to try to keep PJ Washington as well. So they can make it work if they're sending out, Maxi Kleber, Najee Marshall, Daniel Gafford, and Klay Thompson. But they're going to have some other teams help. And the question is, are these teams going to be actually interested in those guys? And would they even want to maybe give up a little something, reroute that to the Heat, and to make the deal flow? And if that's not the case, maybe for a guy like Kleber, for example, maybe they require something from the Mavs to take him on. And if that happens, then it's going to be even harder to make a deal, because the Mavs don't even have any second-round picks to offer. They only have 1 second-round pick by my count. I think they have in their entire disposal to trade.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they're very barren there. Yeah.
These compounding complicated factors from what they have to offer, the salary matching component, now these third and fourth team component. There's just so much resistance that even, again, if the Heat are on board, it just makes a deal so complicated that ultimately I doubted something that big can even come together at this point.
Yeah, and again, this is going to be me just kind of restating something you already said, but I thought this was a really good point. If Miami trades Jimmy Butler, they're trying to shed salary, and so that means they want to be taking back more money, or they want to be taking back less money than Jimmy Butler makes. But Dallas can't do that. Dallas has to do a 1-for-1 match. They don't have the room to go to send to send less salary in that direction and receive back more salary. So the fundamental reason that Miami would be interested in trading Jimmy Butler, maybe there's another, if any scenario where this trade actually were to happen, obviously maybe they could find another reason that would make sense. But the fundamental reason is that Miami is in such a tricky salary cap situation that they wanted to reduce their payroll, and Dallas directly cannot facilitate that for them.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you're going to have to get multiple teams involved, and that's probably the hardest part of it all.
Yossi Gozlan joining us here on the DLLS Mavs Podcast, NBA salary cap analyst, joining us here on the show as we start to look kind of at the books for the Dallas Mavericks and what they could do potentially from a trade perspective. When you analyze the salary cap itself, whether it be for the Mavericks or any of these teams, what's the most difficult part about the way that the rules are structured now for teams to be able to acquire and trade players that really makes it interesting when you're doing the work to try to figure out how these teams can make moves in order to improve their teams going forward here?
It just seems like all these the apron restrictions have been making it so much harder. And I'm beating the same point, but now a lot of these apron teams are going to need extra teams to help them. Back in the previous CBA, they've made it a little more complicated, but all it was if you're already a taxpayer, you're just paying the tax, then you just can't take in as much money in a trade as a team that's below the tax can, or a team with cap space. They can just take on the difference of whatever cap space they have in the player salary. But now it's more complicated, where not only can teams above the first apron not increase their payroll, but there's like the second tier of the apron where there's even more complications there. Teams above the second apron can only decrease their payroll in the trade or go dollar for dollar, which is pretty rare. And so all their by adding these limitations, they're just forcing teams to expand their deals, add extra teams. If you look at the Karl Anthony Towns trade, a deal which would be honestly like way harder to do mid-season due to certain aspects, is that deal was done in the offseason, and they needed a third team to take on all these extra players.
I mean, Dallas this summer just completed a 6-team deal, right? Which is the most teams that's ever been involved. And that was for Clay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. But with this cat trade, that one's so interesting to me because the Knicks didn't even have like enough money to meet the threshold they needed to send out to take in Towns' salary. But they went through, it's not like a loophole. This has been done before with other sign and trades, but they met that amount by sign and trading players they had the rights to. So now you're forcing teams to like really dig deep and find these other creative avenues to get something done. But the biggest thing is now you almost always have to involve a third or fourth team because of these extra limitations.
Real quick, but I thought Luke Byrne, he's Byrne. Thank you. He says, and I think this is a good point, this could be a really quiet trade season with all these rules. Do you think there's any truth to that? Do you think that the added complications is actually going to reduce the ability for NBA teams to actually construct deals that are feasible under the salary cap?
So I think if I had to predict, it will be a quieter offseason, but not necessarily because of the rules. Because if anything, they've technically made the rules a lot easier for most teams. There's only few teams that are actually impacted by these restrictions. And most teams that are well below the aprons, they have actually even more flexibility. They could take on even more money than ever before. Now they made mid-level exceptions. Those are now trade exceptions. So a lot of teams didn't use them over the offseason like in the traditional sense, and they're holding them over for trade opportunities come deadline. So it could be more active in that sense, but maybe just in terms of the big names, the star power that's moved, I feel like there's not going to be too much going on there. And again, it's not necessarily because of rules, but it just seems like a lot of guys have got into new homes recently. And so far, the biggest names seem to be Jimmy Butler, who, when he first was rumored to be available over the offseason, I wasn't even like that convinced. I didn't really talk about it much because it just seemed more like a contract thing. Seems like he's trying to get an extension or something. And then like Brandon Ingram, who his name's been out there for a while. Now he's injured. That's more complicated. And then everyone else, it's more periphery. We're not even sure how available they are. A guy like Trae Young, for example, his name will always be out there, but he's probably not really actually available. So I just don't see what are the big names in terms. So if you're hoping for like a splashy trade deadline in that sense, I probably wouldn't get my hopes up.
Yossi, tell the folks that they can find you and the work that you got going on, man.
You guys can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, at Yossi Gozlan. You can find me on YouTube also at Yossi Gozlan. And now I just literally 15 minutes ago published my Substack. It's called The Third Apron. And I'll be posting a lot of my written work there now. I haven't written for about a year since I left HoopsHype, and I'm back. I'm glad to be back in it. And then you can see all my salary cap sheets on capsheets.com.
Awesome, man. Well, you do terrific work covering one of the more difficult things in sports these days when it comes to the NBA salary cap and the team's management. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to the next visit here on the DLLS Mavs Podcast. Really appreciate it.
Yossi, appreciate you.
Good luck. Good luck with the Substack.
Thank you for having me on, guys.
We all silly like the mayor.